Hello everyone, my name is Anton Pelcher, I'm an engineer and I've been building fish farming facilities for over 10 years. In one of my videos, I talked about the specifics of designing a recirculating aquaculture system for raising African catfish, but I didn't really talk about its pros and cons as a business venture. Be sure to watch this video until the end because I'll be talking about the 7 main advantages of raising African catfish, specifically as a business. And I'll also touch on 3 significant drawbacks because of which you might want to write off this type of fish entirely. So make yourself comfortable and let's get started. And the very first advantage is the high productivity per square meter of the farm. Imagine you can raise 3 to 4 times more catfish than trout and 10 times more than sturgeon, and 100 times more than shrimp or crayfish in the same building area. Why is that? There are 2 main factors. First, it's the very high stocking density, the highest density among all fish species I know of. Imagine you can stock about 350 kilograms of catfish per cubic meter. That's the density. In comparison, trout is 150, and for sturgeon it's 5 times less, only 70. Not to mention shrimp and crayfish, where everything is measured in kilograms. That is, usually it doesn't even reach 10. And secondly, it's the very fast growth. The thing is, African catfish reaches market weight in just half a year, whereas sturgeon needs at least a year to a year and a half to reach the same market weight. African catfish, it grows very quickly. The next advantage is this. It's very easy to get your own stocking material with catfish. Why am I mentioning this? Because in order to raise your own broodstock, for example, sturgeon requires at least 4 to 5 years, while to raise your own broodstock of African catfish, 1 year is enough. Also, African catfish breed very frequently, so basically to be completely autonomous and have your own stocking material, you only need a few extra tanks for females and males and a little patience. Low production cost. The average cost of raising 1 kilogram of African cat. And finally, it's that African catfish are easier to farm. Overall, the technology is simpler. You don't need oxygen equipment, you don't need disinfection. The whole system is much simpler. The catfish are kept more compactly, meaning you need much less space. The area of the farm needed to grow the same amount of fish is smaller, energy consumption is lower, and so is gas consumption. So basically, if you look at everything, catfish are about twice as cheap everywhere compared to sturgeon or trout. The complexity of farming. The thing is, as I just mentioned, catfish are a simple species to farm. The thing is, raising fry, especially and even market-sized fish like sturgeon or trout, is a much more complicated process than with African catfish. African catfish don't get sick and don't require pure oxygen. So basically, the entire technology is much simpler, which is another significant advantage. Inexpensive equipment. Again, because catfish are undemanding and can be stocked at high densities, the cost of a production line is 3 to 5 times lower for the same output compared to sturgeon or trout. This results in significant savings and a much faster return on investment. Why is that? Let's go over it again. You don't need oxygenation equipment and you don't need disinfection systems. You don't need as many tanks because catfish can be stocked very densely. And if you do need tanks, then accordingly, you also need fewer pipelines and the farm area required is smaller. Overall, you save on everything with African catfish. A lower price segment. Even though there are some nuances when it comes to selling catfish, nevertheless, compared to the price of 1 kilogram of sturgeon or trout, it's at least half as much. That's why the price segment, as well as the potential mass audience for African catfish, is much larger. It's a very good fish for processing. Well, for example, what can you do with sturgeon or trout? You can cut them up, cold smoke or hot smoke them, and at most, salt them. With African catfish, the range of products is much wider. It's excellent for processing into cutlets, sausages, frankfurters, and any kind of semi-finished products. In fact, its meat is such that it fits perfectly into any semi-finished product, which then goes into the freezer and can be stored there. It really does keep for a long time, it has a long shelf life, and you can easily sell it through any outlets. By the way, for those who have already tried African catfish, be sure to share your opinion in the comments. How is it best prepared? What does it taste best with? And do you even like this fish? Please share your thoughts. It's very important to me. Let's talk about the most interesting part. The pros are clear. But what about the cons? The first and most significant drawback, which is firstly why many people don't get into this business at all, and some end up losing their business, is the special approach required for sales. The thing is, there isn't a large, ready-made market for African catfish. The existing market is still quite small. At one point, it was practically zero, and now it's about 1,000 tons of marketable fish per year. That's still not much. It's even less than for sturgeon. Why is that? Because it was brought here. It's a non-traditional species in Russia, nobody knows it, and women are afraid of it because of its big whiskered head. Therefore, in order to sell African catfish, you need to develop your own marketing strategy and look for the right approaches. And in fact, I know quite a few catfish farms that approach sales rather weakly, and they fail to establish a market for African catfish, and soon such farms close down. There really are such cases. Therefore, if you are going into African catfish farming, you must clearly understand what you will do with the final product. Warm water, I wouldn't say it's a drawback, it's just a feature. But the thing is, if you don't have a proper heating source at hand, and for example, you only have an expensive one available, no electricity at all and no possibility to install a pellet boiler or a coal boiler. In such a case, raising African catfish can be expensive and not very profitable. Because it's a tropical fish, it needs a temperature of 26 to 28 degrees. Right now I'm standing here at the farm itself and the air temperature is 30 degrees. In short, this fish needs warm water, and you should think ahead and make sure you have a proper, reliable heating source. And third and finally, at an African catfish farm, you really need powerful mechanical and biological filtration. But if the first and most common reason is that people simply couldn't find a market for African catfish, then the second is right at the top. The reason farms shut down is problems with the technology. The thing is, catfish are stocked at very high densities. There's a lot of waste, warm water, rapid growth of microorganisms, and the standard filters that work well for sturgeon and trout will immediately get clogged, start overflowing, and stop working properly. That's why, on average, African catfish require drum filters and biofilters that are several times more powerful. If you're interested in learning more about this, follow the pop-up link. There's a video there about the specifics of designing recirculating aquaculture systems for raising African catfish. Check it out. If you found this video helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. This was Anton Pelcher, and my channel is all about how to raise fish and make good money from it. See you.